My name is Rowan Ellis, 34 years old. If you had asked me that Sunday morning what kind of day we were walking into, I would have said ordinary. The sky was clear, Maisie was humming in the back seat, and my biggest worry was whether we'd remembered the sunscreen. My mom had called it a Cousin's Day barbecue, which usually meant burgers, lemonade, and my siblings pretending everything was fine until someone brought up last year's cruise. Maisie, clutching her rainbow backpack, could barely contain her excitement. She'd stuffed it with sticker sheets to hand out to her cousins, a few crayon drawings, including one of my parents' house with all of us smiling, and a tiny origami star she'd spent 20 minutes folding just for my mom. She tries so hard, even though most of the cousins are older and barely pay attention to her. She still believes that if she brings enough kindness, someone will hand some back. We pulled up to the familiar house a little before lunchtime. Same white siding, same flower pots arranged like soldiers along the walkway. Same wind chimes tinkling even when there wasn't much wind. Maisie practically skipped up the steps. I knocked on the door and waited for my parents' usual over-the-top greeting. Instead, the door opened to my mother's stiff smile. "Oh, you're here," she said flatly, stepping aside without hugging Maisie or even looking at the drawing she held up. "Food's almost ready." Inside, the backyard was already full. Kids tossing beanbags, my brother manning the grill like he owned the yard, neighbors lounging with plastic cups like they were part of the family. My dad wore his usual barbecue uniform, cargo shorts, and a smug smile. The Johnson family, our neighbors, had their kids with them too. They weren't cousins, but my parents adored them, mostly because they exaggerated admiration for Mom's garden and Dad's tool shed like they were visiting royalty. I should have known something was off when my mom glanced at Maisie's handmade picture, made a vague cute, and set it face down on the counter. Lunch was the usual. Overcooked burgers, hot dogs charred enough to crumble. My mother flitted around like she was directing a live studio audience. My father kept checking his watch like he was waiting for the perfect dramatic moment. It came right after lunch. "Kids," Mom called out, "come over here, we have a surprise." The cousins stampeded toward the patio. Maisie squeezed my hand, bouncing on her toes. My dad emerged from the garage with a tidy stack of blue envelopes. I recognized the logo instantly. Adventure Lake. Season passes. Not one-day tickets, season passes. The biggest theme park in our area. Roller coasters, water rides, fireworks. Something that takes planning and budgeting to afford. Something Maisie had dreamed about since she saw the commercial in June. My mother practically glowed. "Every grandkid gets one. Line up." They made a show out of it, calling out names, posing for photos, handing out envelopes like golden tickets. Each child tore theirs open and shrieked with joy. Maisie held her place in the back of the line, shifting from foot to foot, clutching my arm each time a name was called. She didn't even notice she was last. But I did. Dad handed an envelope to the last cousin. Then he looked at the stack in his hands. Then at me. Then, casually, he said, "Oh, looks like we're out." Silence. Maisie blinked. "Grandpa, what about mine?" Mom chimed in, not missing a beat. "Sorry, sweetheart, we only had so many." Then she turned and handed the 3 remaining envelopes to the Johnson boys. They weren't even related. They weren't even close family friends. They were just convenient. The adults around us tried to keep smiling, pretending this wasn't awful, pretending this wasn't intentional. Maisie didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just went still, like someone pulled the light out of her. I stepped forward. "Are you serious?" My mom laughed, an airy practice sound. "Maybe if you hadn't been so independent about that cruise last fall, we could have afforded a few more passes." Ah, there it was. The cruise. The luxury family vacation I didn't pay for. The one my parents expected me to help fund, even though I'd spent the spring drowning under medical bills for Maisie's asthma treatments and rent increases and skipped lunches just to stay afloat. They'd been throwing little jabs ever since. Subtle, sharp, constant. But this wasn't subtle. This was calculated humiliation of a 7-year-old in front of 24 people. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the paper plates or demand an apology they wouldn't mean. I crouched beside Maisie instead. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "let's go." We packed our things, past the Johnson kids comparing passes, walked past my parents' confused half smiles like smoke slipping through cracks. My mom called after me, "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. It was a joke." It wasn't a joke. Maisie didn't say a word in the car. She stared out the window, twisting a loose thread on her backpack. Halfway home, she whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. No, baby, you did everything right. But inside, something else snapped. Something old. Something that had been quietly cracking for years. What my parents didn't know, what they'd forgotten, is that last year, when they were planning their basement renovation, I helped them set up their accounts. I'd connected their bank sections, organized the budget, and, without thinking, left myself listed as a secondary manager on the renovation fund. The one holding $8,000. Money they were counting on. Money meant for drywall and new windows. Money they assumed they were entitled to because I'd always fixed things for them. That evening, while Maisie drew quietly at the table, I logged into the account. Not to spend it, not to steal it, just to move it somewhere they couldn't touch. A clean click, a silent transfer. A door closing they wouldn't notice until they needed it. It wasn't revenge. It was a boundary. They were so quick to cut my daughter out of joy. Now they were going to learn what it felt like to be cut out of something they took for granted. And this quiet decision, made in the soft glow of our kitchen, was only the beginning. I expected the fallout to be immediate. My mom storming into my inbox before sunrise, my dad leaving a series of increasingly angry voicemails, Jenny chiming in with a guilt-drenched monologue about family unity. That's how things usually went in our family. One spark, and suddenly we were all trapped inside my mother's emotional wildfire. But days passed, and nothing happened. Not a single call, not one text, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post. It was almost disappointing. Meanwhile, Maisie slowly stopped asking why Grandma and Grandpa hadn't called. By the fourth day, she didn't mention them at all. Instead, she stayed close to me, hovering in the hallway while I cooked, sitting silently at the dining table, walking slower in the mornings on our way to school. On the sixth day, everything broke open. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee when my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification from Dad. Hey, Rowan, we tried to log into the renovation account to schedule the contractor deposit. Balance looks wrong. Maybe you can check on your end? He didn't sound furious, just mildly inconvenienced. Like the missing $8,000 was the equivalent of misplacing a set of keys. That alone told me everything. I didn't call back. A few hours later, my mom sent a text. Hi, sweetheart. There must have been a glitch. We saw the account is drained. Could you look into this? Mom. Drained. Not moved. Not inaccessible. Drained. That was the part that made me laugh quietly to myself, because it showed exactly how she viewed the money. Not mine, not shared, theirs, and therefore lost to them equals drained. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. By the next morning, they escalated in the only way they knew how, physically showing up. The knock came at 9:14 a.m. Not polite, not patient, insistent. Maisie was curled up on the couch, watching cartoons, still in her pajamas, little legs tucked under her as she held her stuffed fox. At the sound of the knock, she looked at me with that searching expression kids get when they're trying to figure out if something's safe. I opened the door just enough to see my parents standing there. Dad went straight to accusation. What did you do? Not what happened. Not is everything okay? Not why is the account different? What did you do? Behind him, Mom wore her signature guilt smile, the tight, brittle one she used before saying something manipulative. Sweetheart, she said, we really need that money back. The contractors are scheduled, materials bought. We can't lose the deposit. I moved it, I said plainly. That's all. Mom blinked, as if those words didn't compute. But why? That money was for the family project. Family project. Translation. Something that benefits everyone, except me. I crossed my arms. You humiliated my daughter. Mom's mouth twitched. Oh, the passes? That was a misunderstanding. Dad nodded vigorously. We miscounted, that's all. Right, I said. And the neighbors just happened to get the extras? The same neighbors who flatter you every time they show up uninvited? Mom bristled. Don't be dramatic. They were there. Kids love Adventure Lake. Maisie loves it too, I said. Or did you forget that when you skipped over her? Mom's tone sharpened instantly. We didn't skip her. You're blowing this out of proportion. You've always been so sensitive about your independence. There it was again. The cruise. That's why you punished a 7-year-old? I asked. Because I wouldn't pay for your luxury vacation? Dad stepped forward. We need the $8,000 back. The renovation starts in 2 weeks. What are we supposed to tell the workers now? I shrugged. Tell them whatever you want. You're sabotaging us, Mom snapped. You sabotaged yourselves, I said calmly. The second you made my daughter feel like she didn't belong. Mom scoffed. You're teaching her to hold grudges. This is childish. Maisie heard her name and peeked around the corner, wide-eyed. That was all I needed to end the conversation. You should go, I said. Mom tried to start another sentence, but Dad tugged her sleeve. "Let's just leave," he muttered. They walked out muttering about ungrateful children and overreacting parents. I shut the door. Maisie came over, her voice soft. "Are they mad?" "No," I said, kneeling so we were eye level. "They're just wrong." She nodded slowly, absorbing that. "Kids don't need long explanations. Just truth," said gently. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed again. A long message from Mom. "Rowan, I am hurt. We tried to fix things, but you're acting unreasonable. The renovation account was meant for all of us, not just me and your father. Your decisions are punishing the entire family. We deserve better than this from you." Mom. Not a single mention of Maisie, not one apology, not one moment of reflection. Just blame, just entitlement, just a reminder that in her mind, I was a tool, not a daughter. And that told me everything I needed to know. Because they thought the renovation account was the consequence. But it wasn't. It wasn't even close. That was just the warm-up. The real hit, the one they never saw coming, was something they'd forgotten entirely. My Uncle Ray, the quiet one, the one they always thought they could use, the one who actually controlled the family's biggest source of money, referrals, and contract work. They used him for years and assumed he'd always be there. What they didn't know, he'd been watching them just as carefully as he'd been watching me. And when he learned what they did to Maisie and what they said about her, he wasn't going to take their side. Uncle Ray replied in less than 30 seconds. "Anytime. Not what happened. Not is everything okay. Not are you sure. Just anytime." That's the thing about Ray. He doesn't posture. He doesn't dramatize. He just waits, watches, and steps in when the line has been crossed so cleanly, even the calmest person would say, "Enough." We met at a small cafe on the east side of town, the kind with chipped wooden tables and a bell that jingled soft as a wind chime every time the door opened. He was already sitting in the back booth, a black coffee in front of him, his expression unreadable. I slid into the bench across from him. He didn't waste time. "Tell me what happened." So I did. Every detail. The backyard humiliation, the fake smiles, the Adventure Lake debacle, the leftover envelopes handed to neighbor kids, Maisie's silence, Maisie's question. What did I do wrong? I told him about the renovation money, their doorstep confrontation, their refusal to apologize, the voicemail, the one where my father said Maisie didn't fit in with this family anymore. That was the part where Ray's jaw tightened, only slightly, but enough. When I finished, he didn't look shocked, or confused, or conflicted. He looked like a man who had already guessed most of it and was quietly devastated to be right. "Are you done trying to make peace?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Completely done." He nodded once, like he'd been waiting years to hear me say that. "All right then," he murmured, lifting his coffee. "They're out." I didn't understand at first. Out of what? He set the mug down. Everything. And suddenly I did understand. My parents had spent the last 20 years leaning heavily on the family business. The construction network, the renovation crews, the electrician contacts, the off-the-books referrals for cheap materials, the small loans Ray occasionally extended, the priority scheduling they never said thank you for. They acted like it was theirs by birthright. They forgot the business wasn't theirs. It was Ray's. "What exactly does that mean?" I asked, even though a cold certainty was already forming. Ray leaned back in the booth, voice low. "It means no more contracts, no more referrals, no jobs, no discounts, no priority crews, no under-the-table work, no side gigs, no professional favors. Nobody in my network will pick up the phone for them again. Not a one." It landed like a quiet earthquake. Ray wasn't shouting. He wasn't theatrical. He wasn't punishing them because I asked. He was doing it because, in his eyes, they'd crossed the unforgivable line. They'd made a child feel unwanted. "They think cruelty is a currency," he said. "Let them see what happens when it stops paying." He finished his coffee, placed a few bills under the cup, and stood. "Go home," he said. "I'll handle the rest." And the strange thing was, I believed him. It didn't take long. 3 days later, I saw their car creeping up the street from my living room window, parked across from my house like they were preparing for a hostage negotiation. When the doorbell rang, I already knew what was coming. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me so Maisie wouldn't hear. Mom didn't even attempt the soft act this time. "Ray cut us out," she snapped. "Do you know what that means? Henderson Roofing dropped our job. The electrician canceled. The drywall team says they're fully booked. This is because of you." I didn't answer. She kept going. "You had no right. None. We helped build that business." I tilted my head. "You helped?" or you exploited every free favor Ray ever offered." Her face hardened. Dad jumped in, arms folded, voice tight. "This is our reputation. You've taken everything from us." I looked at both of them, two adults who had humiliated a child over a theme park pass, now acting like victims because their convenience evaporated. "You're upset you lost access," I said. "Not that you lost us." Mom's mouth twisted. "Are you really going to destroy your parents over one awkward moment?" "One awkward moment," I repeated quietly. "You humiliated my daughter, your granddaughter, on purpose, in front of everyone." Mom waved a hand. "She's sensitive. Not every kid fits every family dynamic. We always tried with her, but—" She didn't finish the sentence, because the door behind me creaked. Maisie stood there, small hand wrapped around the frame, eyes wide and impossibly sad. She'd heard everything. My mother froze, my father went pale, and Maisie didn't say a word. She just looked at them, really looked, and something settled in her gaze, a quiet, painful clarity. Then she turned around and walked back inside. No tears, no begging, just the stillness of a child finally understanding the truth. I shut the door behind her. I didn't yell, I didn't curse, I didn't slam anything, but inside me, a door slammed shut so loudly I felt it in my bones. They weren't just petty, they weren't just spiteful, they weren't just bad at being grandparents. They were dangerous. Not in the way you call the police for, in the way people can be dangerous when they take a child's innocence, weigh it against their own pride, and decide the child comes last. That night, Maisie woke up 3 times. Each time she whispered, "I heard voices again," at the door. I sat with her on this couch, held her until her breathing slowed, and stared into the dark, realizing something I hadn't wanted to confront. They weren't going to stop, not unless I made them stop. The next morning, I called Ray. He picked up on the first ring. "No more halfway," I said. "I want it permanent." There was no pause. "Already done," he said. "You don't have to worry about them coming through my door again." Before hanging up, he added something unexpected. "You're not the first one they tried this with, Rowan. You're just the first one who refused to keep playing along." For almost 2 full weeks, my parents disappeared. No calls, no texts, no guilt-laced paragraphs, no neighbor updates, no attempts to show up unannounced. Nothing. On the surface, it looked like peace, but it wasn't. With people like my parents, silence isn't surrender. Silence is strategy. Maisie sensed it too. Kids always do. She didn't ask about them, but she watched me more closely, as if waiting to see which way the wind would shift. Her drawings grew brighter. Pink suns, purple trees, smiling cats. But every once in a while, I'd catch her glancing at the window, almost checking for headlights. I told myself the quiet was a good thing, but I knew better. Storms don't end in silence. They gather there. And then it broke. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I'd just finished shopping, groceries rattling in the cart as I pushed it toward the car. When my phone lit up, I almost ignored it until I saw the name. "Dad, we need to talk, please." That word, please, was wrong coming from him. It was the polite veneer he used right before manipulation. I didn't answer. 2 hours later, another message. "You win. Just tell us what you want." That one made me stop in the middle of the parking lot. "You win," as if this was a contest, as if Maisie's hurt was strategy instead of trauma. It told me exactly what I needed to know. They still didn't understand what they'd done. They didn't regret excluding Maisie. They regretted that it cost them something. I put the phone away. I didn't reply. That night, a blocked number called. I let it ring until voicemail. I listened to the message later, after Maisie had gone to bed. Dad's voice, quieter now, trying for remorse but landing somewhere near self-pity. "Rowan, we're sorry. This got out of hand. We didn't mean to hurt anyone. We were just trying to make a point. Maybe if you hadn't been so emotional about the cruise, things wouldn't have escalated." Escalated, like they'd tripped and fallen into cruelty. Like Maisie's humiliation was a minor misunderstanding. Like this wasn't entirely their own doing. I deleted the message. Then I turned off my phone. On Sunday, I took Maisie to a watercolor art event at the library. She was in heaven. Water cups, paint-stained fingers, a quiet hum coming from her as she focused on making the most uneven rainbow the world had ever seen. While she painted, I stepped outside to take a call. It was Uncle Ray. "They came to the office deck," he said, "both of them." I leaned against the brick wall, heart steady but tight. "What did they want?" Ray sighed. "They said this was all a misunderstanding, that I'm being unfair, that you're punishing them over something taken out of context. They want back into the business. Referrals, work, anything." "What did you say?" I asked. "I asked them to tell me exactly what happened on your front porch that night." The air stilled around me. Ray continued. They danced around it, told me you misheard, that you were emotional, that maybe your feelings clouded things. Of course, their script never changed. Then, Ray said, voice hardening, I asked your mother if she loved Maisie. My breath stopped. She didn't say yes, he said. She looked down and said, we've always tried with her. Then she said, some kids just don't fit into every family dynamic. It's not our fault. A slow, cold burn crept through my chest. You told them to leave, I said quietly. No, Ray corrected. I told them to get out. He paused, letting the weight of that settle. The door is locked now, Rowan, he said. They won't be in my office again. I closed my eyes. When I went back inside, Maisie held up a postcard she'd finished painting. On it was our little house, big sunflowers in front, and 4 stick figures. Me, her cat Muffin, and a smaller figure labeled Uncle Ray. She grinned. He visits now. She said it so simply, like she'd rearranged the concept of family all on her own. And in that moment, I loved her more fiercely than I knew one person could love another. That night, at 11 p.m., one more message came in. From Mom. No greeting, no apology, no attempt at repair. Just, we've been talking. Maybe we should speak with Maisie directly. She deserves to hear our side, too. Their side. As if a 7-year-old needed to hear why her humiliation was justified. As if emotional abuse could be rebranded as a misunderstanding. As if airing their ego wounds to a child was appropriate closure. I didn't reply. Maisie didn't need their side. She'd heard enough. She'd heard everything. I set my phone aside, went to check on her. She was curled up with Muffin, her breathing soft and even. She didn't need explanations. She needed peace. And I was finally giving it to her. 2 days later, Ray called again. Just an update, he said. They tried to go around me. Of course they had. They contacted a junior partner, he continued. Tried to say I was letting family drama get in the way of business. Tried to get back in through the side door. How'd that go? I asked. Ray snorted. I shut it down before they finished the first sentence. Then something shifted in his tone. I'm sending you copies, he said, just so you never second-guess yourself. He forwarded everything. Emails, voicemails, screenshots of their messages to the partner. It was all the same language I'd grown up with. Rowan is emotional. She's blowing this out of proportion. We didn't do anything wrong. She's letting a child's feelings dictate adult decisions. A child's feelings, not her well-being, not her safety, not her trust. Her feelings. That was all she was to them, an inconvenience when she didn't play her role. Ray ended the call with one final line. You're not the first they've hurt, but you are the first who refused to play along. I hung up and just sat there for a moment, letting the truth settle. Maisie wandered into the room, holding a drawing. A tall office building with a smiling stick figure waving from a window. Look, she said proudly, it's Uncle Ray. He helps people fix things. She wasn't wrong. She was redefining family in real time. A few nights later, while we were making dinner, Maisie asked, Are Grandma and Grandpa still mad? I considered my words. I don't know. She thought about that, then nodded. I don't want to go back there, she said softly. You don't have to, I told her. Her smile was small, but it was real. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need a confession or redemption arc. What I needed was exactly this. A daughter who finally felt safe, a home free from chaos, a boundary that held firm. They tried to make her feel like she didn't belong, but all they really did was show themselves out. The strange thing about finally cutting someone out is that the quiet doesn't come all at once. It trickles in slowly, like a faucet that used to gush now only drips, until it stops entirely. And when it does, you don't celebrate. You don't cry. You just notice that, for the first time in forever, you can hear yourself think. By late spring, that's where Maisie and I were. She started sleeping through the night. She stopped glancing at the windows in the evenings. Her drawings grew whimsical again. Wide, smiling suns, dancing animals, stick figures holding hands instead of standing alone. The absence of my parents didn't leave a void. It left room. Room for new routines, room for new traditions, room for a different kind of family. Ray kept his word. My parents tried everything. Emails, texts, calls, attempts to contact his employees, all escalating in a frantic attempt to get back whatever access they'd lost. But Ray didn't budge. He kept the gates closed and the family network intact without them. One afternoon, while Maisie was building a blanket fort in the living room, Ray called. I told them, he said plainly, if they ever want back in the circle, even a chance, they'd have to start by apologizing. To you. And to Maisie. My breath caught. And they refused, Ray said. called you dramatic, said you're blowing things up, said you're letting a child dictate adult decisions. I pressed my lips together. Of course. They won't apologize, he continued, because they don't think they did anything wrong. And that was the truest thing anyone had said about my parents. They didn't do remorse. They did strategy. If an apology didn't benefit them, it didn't exist. And right now, they had nothing left to bargain with. Summer came early. Maisie wanted to sign up for swim lessons, then soccer, then an art class. All things I finally had time and emotional bandwidth for because I wasn't constantly putting out fires my parents lit. One evening, while we were chopping vegetables for dinner, she looked up at me and asked, "Are Grandma and Grandpa still mad?" There was no fear in her voice, just curiosity. "I don't know," I said honestly. She nodded at the cutting board like she understood more than she should. "I don't want to go back there," she said simply. "You don't have to," I replied. And there it was again, that quiet smile she saved for moments she needed reassurance. 3 weeks later, the silence broke again. But this time it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a single phone vibration on a lazy Sunday afternoon. No caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened later, I had to replay it to make sure I heard it right. It was my mother, except not the version I knew. Her voice was smaller, shaky, older somehow. "Rowan," she began, breath trembling. "I don't know what to say. I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. I know we broke something. I know we hurt Maisie. I know I pushed too far. I didn't see it then, but I see it now." I sat down slowly, letting the weight of it settle. She continued, "You're a good mother, better than I ever was, and she's a good girl, better than we deserved. If forgiveness never comes, I'll understand." No justification, no excuses, no cruise references, no minimizing, just acceptance. And for the first time since this whole war began, I felt something shift. Not for them, but for me. Not forgiveness, but release. A loosening of something I didn't know I'd been holding. 2 days later, something happened that changed everything again. Maisie came home from school clutching an envelope in both hands, like it was a treasure she wasn't sure she should open. "Mom," she said softly, "this is for me." My stomach tightened when I saw the handwriting. My mother's. Cursive, old-fashioned, shaky. I opened it with careful hands, scared of what the words might do to Maisie's healing. But inside was a letter so different from the woman who raised me that I almost didn't believe it. "Dear Maisie, I was wrong. I hurt you. I should have treated you better. You didn't do anything wrong. I hope you're happy. Love, Grandma." No guilt, no manipulation, no but or if only. Just accountability. Maisie looked up at me, unsure. "Can I write back?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to protect every inch of the peace we'd fought for. I wanted to keep her heart wrapped in bubble wrap and keep their words far, far away. But this wasn't my letter. This wasn't my wound to decide. This was hers. So I said, "Write what you feel." She sat at the kitchen table, tongue poking out in concentration as she wrote her reply on a sheet of pastel stationery. When she finished, she handed it to me. "Dear Grandma, thank you for your letter. I miss you sometimes. I feel safe with my mom. I hope you can be happy too. Love, Maisie." It cracked me open in a way I wasn't prepared for. She mailed it with a tiny heart sticker sealing the flap. No return address. Just a message released into the world. Not reconciliation, not surrender, not reopening the door. Just acknowledgement. Maisie took control of her own story in a way I never did at her age. And I realized something. I didn't need to forgive my parents to move on. Maisie already had, at least enough for her heart to stay soft. And that was enough. Weeks later, I stood in the kitchen, sipping coffee while Maisie worked on a watercolor postcard. Blue sky, green hill, a little stick figure with a briefcase. "Who's that?" I asked. She smiled. "Uncle Ray. He helps fix things." I nodded. "Yes, he does." But the truth, the one I didn't say out loud, was this. I fix things too. I broke a cycle I should have been trapped in. I gave my daughter the peace I never had. I chose her over loyalty to dysfunction. And I didn't lose a single thing worth keeping. My parents lost everything they cared about in the long run. Not the $8,000, not the contracts, not the reputation. They lost the one thing they couldn't replace. Access to us. And in the end, that was the real consequence. I forgave them eventually, not for their sake, but because holding on to the anger felt like drinking poison. But I never gave them money back. And deep down, I know that's the part that still keeps my mother awake at night. Not the money itself, but the fact that I walked away with it and never once looked back.